Okay, so model merging, what, why, and how. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about model merging, and in particular, I'm going to cover a few of my most recent papers. So you might recognize this scene from a famous movie. Hands up if you recognize the scene. Okay, so this is The Matrix, a very famous movie, and this guy is the main character, Neo. Basically, in this scene, he's doing something super cool. So he's connected to a computer, like with cables entering directly the brain from behind. Okay, it's kind of creepy scene, and he's being uploaded with information on how to do things, like how to fight in kung fu style. Okay, so like immediately flashed with kung fu information. Okay, and then he does it also for 1,000 more martial arts, because all the point of the movie is fighting, apparently. But now imagine if we could do this today, like instant knowledge sharing from a machine to our brains. Okay, I could flash my brain with differential geometry. I could flash my brain with, I don't know, machine learning. And there you go. I have information geometry in my mind for free. Okay, so this is my kind of my dream. And actually, more than 1 century ago, people believed that today we would have this. Okay, so you see this small drawing from 1901 with students not having to study anymore because you can flash update the brains with knowledge. Okay, so fortunately we are far from here, from that wish, but I think we're getting closer. Okay, so let's see.
Are they listening to it or they're getting?
No, I don't know actually, but you see, but the books get minced and then they get transformed into knowledge. They're students, so they're not listening. All right. Okay, so now imagine the following. So Alice knows about geometry, and then imagine that Bob knows about biology. Okay, so it would be super cool if you could do some kind of summation, like a human algebra, if you will, and then you would get Clara, who can design new proteins. Okay, so you bring together this kind of knowledge. Now, unfortunately, humans cannot really do this way. So this is not possible today. But
Clara, who doesn't know anything.
right. She's puzzled, actually. So Clara doesn't know anything. But if we have artificial humans or artificial machines, then this kind of knowledge algebra becomes possible. Okay, so this is what we call model merging, or model merging is more of an umbrella term encapsulating all kind of methods to make this possible. Okay, now we need to define the plus sign. Okay, so this is all where all the magic happens. Okay, now there are several settings. We're focusing on 2 different settings for model merging. Setting number 1, it's super simple. So imagine that you are training different models to solve the same task. Okay, so different models that need to classify and list. So we have model A and model B. Can you see the neural network? I cannot see anything. You can see it? No? Okay, so there are 2 neural networks over here. Okay, so maybe
Is it PowerPoint or?
it's PowerPoint.
It's just the projector.
It's just the projector. Okay, it's just the colors. It's not so important. Imagine 2 neural networks over there. Okay, and then you train these 2 different models. Okay, now you can see them. And now the idea is that if you have 2 different experts that can solve the same task, maybe you can combine their knowledge together so that they can somehow cooperate to solve the task better. Okay, so this is our setting number 1. Okay, and I don't know if you're familiar with model soups or other similar algorithms. So you have like a population of experts solving the same problem, and you can bring their knowledge together. Okay, so this is setting number 1 for model merging. Very good. And then I'm going to cover setting number 2. still not works, right? Yeah. So setting number 2 is closer to what people call linear mode connectivity. So I'm going to cover connectivity in a second, but if you're familiar with it, this is setting number 2. So you have some pre-trained model, okay? So it's kind of a backbone, and then you train it, you get an expert in something, and now you want to differentiate this model to solve a specific task, a new one. So you can fine-tune it to solve a new task. So you get model T1. Or you could start from that pre-trained model to solve another task. So you get a model T2 via fine-tuning, okay? And now this setting for model merging, basically we want to take these two experts, T1 and T2, and then we want to bring them together via some merging procedure. And then we want to get to one individual model that can solve both task T1 and task T2 at the same time. And you want, of course, you want to preserve as much as possible the accuracy of the individual models that you're going to merge. Okay. So this is our setting number 2, and there is a lot of recent research focusing on this setting. All right, is it clear? So of course, feel free to interrupt and shoot your questions, okay? So let's make it like a good exchange.
One question is setting 3, like from scratch and different tasks, that's not what people think about?
Yes, that's also what people think about,
Okay,
yes.
but
So
why is it not here?
because this is what I'm going to cover with,
Okay.
with my purpose today, okay? Yeah, so there is this Platonic representation hypothesis that actually covers this kind of settings. So from scratch, different tasks, see how you can merge them afterwards, okay? But this is not covered today. Okay, so let's look at the first setting. And I'm going to cover mode connectivity. Have you heard about mode connectivity before? Yes? Okay, so let me, again, interrupt if it's not clear. So first of all, what is a mode? So imagine you have your space of neural networks. Okay, so you have this very high dimensional space where each point is a neural network, is some configuration of parameters. Okay, you can imagine it as Rn, so Euclidean space in n dimensions, where n is the number of parameters. Okay, now a mode. Okay, so here is this very high dimensional space, and you see that it is a curved space, and in particular here the height over the space of just 2 parameters here is the loss of some task. And a mode is basically a model at convergence. So we see here we have 2 modes corresponding to model theta A and then to model theta B. Okay. Okay, you see that any mode lies in a kind of basin of the loss landscape. Okay, so we have like theta B, which lies in this basin. Theta A, I'm not sure if you can see this, but there is a point over here. So there is a local minimum, and that it is model theta A. And now people realize over time a few interesting things. So at the very beginning, people believed that each mode, so each trained neural network, would correspond to a different point on the loss landscape. And all these points were isolated. Okay, so you would have valleys and mountains in between different points, and this was the original belief. Okay. Now somebody, a few years back, discovered that you can actually move from one model to the other, so from one mode to the other, via very narrow tunnels on the loss landscape. And along this tunnel, the loss value stays small. Okay, so somebody found out about this. Now somebody else, after a few years, came up with the following observation, that these narrow tunnels are actually entire low-dimensional low loss manifolds. Okay, so actually you could move within this low loss manifold, and you would always encounter new models outside of the ones that you started with that still have a low loss.
It's low loss in test loss or low loss in training loss.
Come again?
Is this training loss or test loss?
This is validation loss.
Okay.
Usually, this is validation loss. Yes.
It seems the validation loss is changed,
Right. That is right.
and it's not clear what that validation, because it's not being trained on that.
That is correct. Yes, that is
I
correct.
think there's lots of like it's not really proven.
It's
True.
it's not proven.
Yeah, it's like a hypothesis, right?
It is. These papers are full of conjectures. And actually, so let me anticipate that this is not always true. It has been observed in several practical cases that this happens, but it's very difficult to prove anything here. Okay, so but on to one interesting observation. So so imagine that this is a basin where two different models live, theta A and theta B. You see that you could travel from one model to the other via some path on the loss landscape. Okay? So, and of course, along the path, you get new models that solve the task. And people tried to actually discretize this path, actually solve for the path going from one model to the other. You could do this using Bezier curves or polygonal chains and so on, or geodesics and so on and so forth. And one interesting case is when the two models are actually linked by a linear path going from theta A to theta B. Okay. It is not the case in this particular example, because you see that if you go linearly from A to B, you will encounter a large loss. Okay, but there are cases where this is possible. For example, if model B was here, then you would be able to move linearly from A to B. Okay, and then people tried to characterize these particular cases. When does linear mode connectivity take place? Okay, so one way, I mean, this is super intuitive. One way to measure whether the two models are linearly connected is just by measuring the loss in the linear interpolation between A and B. Okay, so if the loss goes up at some point, then these are not linear mode connected. So this is what I'm basically saying with this slide. Okay, so you see this is the loss going on a linear path from A to B. Okay, so you could define a criterion that tells you how linear mode connected you are. So you need to quantify this barrier. Then you need to stay below if you want to stay linear mode connected. But the intuition is what is important here. Okay. Okay, so now the question is, what are interesting cases of linear mode connected models? So let me give you a very obvious one. And you see that I'm going to talk about these two steps, a matching step and a merging step. So let me guide you through these steps. So the first thing to realize, actually it is trivial, but the first time I saw it, I thought, wow, it is so trivial that I never realized. So the idea is that if you have two different models, or actually if you have one model, like imagine an MLP, you could always reshuffle the rows of the weight matrices. So you could permute the neurons of a model at a layer, and then you could anti-permute the columns of the following layer. So let me show you, and this would give you an equivalent model doing exactly the same as the original one. Let me show you. Imagine that you have layer L, you permute the rows. So you're shuffling the neurons of this model. Now you get some representation in the output, right? So it's permuted. Now notice that the nonlinear activation function, it acts element-wise. So it actually, P and sigma, they commute. So you could switch the order of the operations, sigma and P, and you would get exactly the same result. Okay. So what happens is that now you could bring the P on this other side due to the commutativity, and then you could apply the inverse permutation at the input of the next layer. So you would have P transpose, and this basically corresponds to the following operation. So you permute the neurons of the first layer, then you anti-permute the columns of the second layer, and this is equivalent to doing nothing. So you get two equivalent models, one with permuted neurons, the other one where nothing happened, and they are functionally exactly the same. They're functionally equivalent models. So this gives you a recipe to generate combinatorially many, because they have the different weights, but that are actually functionally equivalent. And now there is this conjecture telling us that if you generate new models this way, just by shuffling neurons, then they would live all in the same basin in the loss landscape. Okay. So, and this is actually a conjecture. So let me show you an illustration of this. I hope you can see this. So you have a model A, then you have model B, and model B is obtained from A after permutation of the neurons. Okay, so they actually are functionally equivalent, so they have the same loss. If you're able to find the permutation of these weights that aligns it to the neurons of A, then you're basically teleporting theta B to the same basin as theta A. Okay, so this is the intuition. Okay. Not exactly at the same point, okay? Because, well, first of all, there could be different permutations if you have many symmetries, and also because of numerical errors, or you don't have exactly the same values, okay? But you stay within the basin. And the conjecture tells us that within this basin, you can walk linearly between models, and you get a whole family of equivalent models along the linear path. Okay, so there have been a lot of works trying to solve for this teleportation, so trying to solve for the permutation that relates to different models. And the idea is that once you are able to teleport, then you can do merging more easily because you are in a linear subspace. So you can use like vector algebra to actually do the merging. All right.
There's a bit of a weird thing here though, right? So they're functionally equivalent, like permutation.
Yes.
Why is it going somewhere else?
So going somewhere else, you mean in B?
Like at first, it's a little bit misleading the way that they present it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have theta B, and then you say that it's functionally equivalent to another thing.
Yes.
So you do the permutation. You get a model that's functionally equivalent, but then it's sitting in some other basin.
Yes, because you can imagine that the loss landscape is full of symmetries. So imagine this, the loss landscape looks like a star, and basically there are regions of completely equivalent models on the locally symmetric parts. So yeah.
Yeah.
So it is weird, yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's strange, right?
Because
it's like if they are functionally equivalent to start with, then we should aim nothing. We should gain nothing. And if they're not functionally equivalent, then what the hell are we doing? So it sounds a bit. I mean, it's like it's good to expect that something will happen. Perhaps the truth is more nuanced than what we try to make it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I agree, yes. So just to be clear, what we mean by functional equivalence is that two different models are functionally equivalent if they respond equivalently to the same input. Okay, and actually, but evaluating whether two functions respond the same to the same input is a satisfiability problem. Okay, so it's not solvable polynomial. Okay. It's more general knowledge. Yes.
Question. Actually, then only this, if the functional equivalent hold when the only training data is given in the inflow of the function, I think in that sense, it will be quite useful because in validation set and around the validation set, their output should be a little different in that sense. Their ensemble or their model merging should be get some benefit, isn't it? So my guess is this should be heard only when take the like training, take the input as a training input, or when take the other input beyond the training input, their functional output should be a little different.
I didn't follow too well.
My guess, my little question worry is that if really when we permit the neuron and then get a new function, but their output is same, whatever we take the input, then eventually they are same functions. So we cannot expect some generation when we merging. But so that's why a little not clear for what the function character, what space is the function character.
So maybe later I can show you on the board exactly my geometric intuition as to why this happens. So maybe we can coordinate on the whiteboard if you like. Okay. Now just mentioning that, well, actually this is important. So solving for the permutation between two models. So if you assume that they are linearly mode connected up to permutation. So you want to look for the permutation. Looking for a matching can be phrased as a linear assignment problem. Okay, so this is a very classical problem with efficient algorithms to solve. But actually you should do this at all layers, not just among layer 2 and layer 2, but across all layers. And this is actually the rigorous formulation that you need to solve. So it's a summation of linear assignment problems, which is NP-hard. Okay, so this is difficult to solve. So there are algorithms to do this, and we connected with an expert in these kind of problems. His name is Florian Bernhard from TU Munich. So existing algorithms solve this problem well, but if you don't have just two models, just A and B, imagine you have a collection. You have a collection of models, like n greater than 2 models, and you want to bring them all together to the same basin and then average them somehow, then these kind of algorithms, it doesn't work well, okay? Because it only works well for 2 models. So our idea, so this brings us to one of our recent papers we just presented. So the idea is the following. So whenever, yes?
Have people done some small scale study where
So the question is, have people done small scale study showing that maximizing over all permutation necessarily leads to something better?
I'm not aware of such studies.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's kind of leap of faith right now, saying that it would work.
It is.
Okay.
It is. So keep in mind that small scale here would mean like 7 neurons, or yeah. But I'm not aware of that. No. So one thing we should expect whenever we deal with more than 2 models. So we should expect transitivity or cycle consistency, right? So if you are able to align model A with model B, and model B with model C, and model C with model A, then you would expect that when you close the loop, you go back to the identity, right? If you compose the maps from A to B, from B to C, from C to A, you would expect to see the identity map, okay? And this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen if you solve for all these pairwise alignments independently, okay? Because there could be several different symmetries, and if you don't enforce any cycle consistency, then you will not compose to the identity map. And this is very common. For example, I can show you an example with I don't know, with 3D shapes. So we have this problem in computer vision where you have three-dimensional models, for example, a person like this, a person like this, and a person like that, and you want to correspond the points across the three shapes, then of course you could match the tip of the finger with the tip of the corresponding hand on the other shape, or with the tip of the finger of the other hand, right? So you have the left and the right hand. Okay, so there are symmetries that complicate the problem. Okay, so and if you solve for the correspondence independently for every pair of shapes, then you don't have any guarantee that you will always get the same symmetries. Okay, and so we solve this. So this composition doesn't necessarily go to the identity. We showed this. This really doesn't work. So our idea was the following. So let me skip the math. There are ways of solving this, but the idea is the following: instead of solving for a map, for a permutation from A to B, we solve for a factorization of the map from A to B. So in particular, you see we are solving for a map that goes from A to some abstract domain U, we call a universe. And this map is invertible and is such that if you want to obtain the map from A to B, you could compose the map from A to U and the inverse map from U to B. Okay, so it's basically just a factorization of the map from A to B. We force this factorization, and we force an orthogonal factorization. Okay, so if you now want to get any pairwise map from A to B, from A to C, from C to B, any of them, you just compose the factors, and these will be cycle consistent by construction. Okay, so because you always walk to the universal domain and then you walk back. Okay, so this is what we call the cycle consistent model merging. And yeah, Florian was an expert in this kind of cycle consistent constraints, so we were able to solve the resulting problem, which was very difficult. We were able to solve it efficiently.
The orthogonally constraint R2.
The orthogonality constraint, is it hard to realize because these are permutation matrices, I suppose? And then is there any technicality there?
We relax from permutations to orthogonal matrices,
Okay.
which is easier because it's a manifold. Orthogonal matrices, they form a manifold. So you can do continuous optimization, and then there is a final projection step onto permutations.
Okay, so to understand, then U is, so like the matrix P, PA, PB, PC, they're all orthogonal matrices.
They are.
And so suppose maybe you're not doing this permutation thing now. You're probably doing some, is it low rank projection of some sort?
It is. So yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That makes so much more sense than
Yes.
permutation. I think.
I agree.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so this is the intuition I gave. Yeah. So actually, these kind of optimization problems, there are recipes to solve them. So we used a variant of the Frank-Wolfe or Wolfe algorithm. But yeah, it was we didn't invent anything new here, okay, for the optimization itself. Okay, so let me actually go faster. One thing I really want to talk to you about is that when you merge together models, so I didn't talk about the merging itself. I was just assuming that once we have aligned models, we can just do the algebraic sum between the model weights, and then you get your merged model. Okay, so this is what I've been assuming so far. But there is a problem with these. There are many problems with these. And one of the problems is that when you do this kind of merging, then you could introduce interference between different tasks. So you could actually destroy the skills of a model by overriding the skill with the incoming skill. Okay, so you want to avoid this kind of interference. So we worked a lot on this. And we came up with something surprisingly good. Surprisingly, in the sense that we were suspecting a bug for a very long time. And then we had other people from other universities replicate the method for us independently from us, and everything was working. So let me show it to you. So imagine, so the setting is the following. This is setting number 2. So you have a pre-trained model base, you fine-tune it to task 1. And then you just compute the difference between the parameters at task of the fine-tuned model and the pre-trained model. So just the algebraic difference, so you get a vector. We're gonna call this the task vector for task T1. Now let's do this for another model. For us, it's a different fine-tuning to solve a different task. Task T2, we compute the task vector. And now what people do with this task arithmetic is that they just sum these θ1 plus θ2. Okay, so you get, let me show you. So you get θ1 plus θ2, so you get a new vector that gives you a new model. And this new model, in several practical cases, actually can solve both task T1 and task T2. Okay, this is you should be surprised. Okay, so this is surprising. Now, of course, this is not an excellent model. In many cases, it doesn't behave as well as this fine-tuned model or as well as this other model. Okay, and one of the reasons is that these two task vectors interfere. Okay, so we tried to remove the interference. So we observed the following. How did we observe the following? So it was this was a work of a master student, Antonio Gargiulo. So basically he took a lot of ingredients, then he put them in a box, and then he shuffled like crazy, and then he got a recipe, and it was working like crazy, was working super well, and then we spent 3 months to understand what was going on. Okay, and eventually we found out. So the idea is the following. So this is, so theta i's are task vectors. So this is the task arithmetic idea. Just sum them to the pre-trained. But now remember that actually the weights, they have a structure because the network is designed as a sequence of matrices. Okay, so they have a structure, and people who do task arithmetic, they forgot about this structure. Okay, so we said, okay, no, let's remember that a task vector is actually, for each layer, a task matrix. So it admits a singular value decomposition. Okay, so it can be a square, rectangular, fat, tall, but it admits a singular value decomposition. All right, so let me give you one crucial observation. The first thing is that if you look at the task matrix, if you look at the rank, you will find out that this is extremely low rank in many cases. It's not the weight matrix that is super low rank. It's the task matrix that is super low rank. Okay, remember.
So
Yes.
there's some dimensional.
It might be nice to clarify some dimensional things. So theta is a vector or a matrix?
So people use it as a flattened vector.
Okay, so it's a vector.
Yes.
So delta is also a vector.
Delta is a matrix, but here, when I write this, I mean that now this is not flattened. So these are
Okay.
matrices.
So these are matrices.
These are matrices.
So theta is a matrix, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, so delta is a matrix, and the size is of
the layer.
Okay, so okay, so just the layer, you take the elf layer.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Yes. And then, so layer would be like in and out would be the dimension of those
Correct.
vectors, right? Okay, and then do you know which way are you factorizing, or does it matter?
So you mean with square or rectangular singular values matrices? We are doing the.
If it doesn't matter, it's okay. Like
I'm trying to remember because I think we're doing with the rectangular singular value
Mhm.
matrix. And I also asked why we're doing that. And I don't remember the answer.
Okay,
I think
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter actually, because all the derivations we do over here, they are in terms of they're written as summations. Okay, so this is just it's just a summation of rank 1 matrices. Okay, so yeah.
I mean, that one's fine.
That one's fine, but I think when L comes into picture, I'm wondering if there is something, because I don't know which way they should behave similarly. Like, what's the common thing between all the layers, right? So one dimension should be more important than the others, is what my intuition says, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so let's see if the following slides help the discussion. Yep. Okay, so the first thing is that we found out that these task matrices are very low rank. Low rank, like, so the plot is a little bit misleading. So what I mean here is that we are taking basically 20% of, not of all the singular values. This is 20% of the rank of the matrix. Okay, so these are very few singular values. Okay, so in this sense, these task matrices they can be compressed. They're very much compressible without sacrificing accuracy too much. Okay, so this is the first observation. And so we thought, I will close with this paper, okay? So we thought that maybe if we do this kind of filtering, like the Eckert-Young filtering, so we just take the top 20% singular values, then this would remove interference because it's removing noise. So we tried. So this is the just task arithmetic. Okay, so this is the accuracy you get. Then let's do this low rank filtering. It gets worse. Okay, so this was anticlimactic. But wait, so low rank is not enough. Could be useful for compression though. Okay, so hold that thought. Okay, so what did we do? We tried to understand what was going on. So we took the singular vectors at a layer for one task, and then the singular vector of the task matrix at the same layer for another task. Then we tried to compute the inner products between the singular vectors, in particular, the right singular vectors. And then we found out that they do not align at all. Okay, so we came up with this quantity we called inter-task interference is the sum over all inner products between all pairs of singular vectors. Okay, so we said, so this is actually, there is a lot of interference between singular vectors. And this is the interference across the network. So you see that the shallow layers, so closer to the input, they're the more general layers, they have more interference. And then as they specialize to each task, the interference goes down. Okay, so we did some analysis of this kind. And we said, okay, then maybe we could remove this interference somehow by orthogonalizing the singular vectors from different tasks. Of course, within each task, the singular vectors are already orthogonal by construction, but among different tasks, we can orthogonalize them. So this is the recipe. I'm gonna play a video, okay? Which I cannot stop. So let's one-shot talk. So we have these two per layer task matrices, task I and task J, okay? At one given layer, say layer number 10. Play. So we're gonna see the SVD of each of them. So we have singular vectors, singular values. It's a square representation for the singular values. Then we reduce, so low rank approximation, and then we reconstruct a new potential candidate SVD, and we resynthesize a new task matrix. You see that now these, yes, okay. So we have the singular vectors from task 1, singular vectors from task 2, singular values, but these orange ones and the green ones, they are made forcibly orthogonal to each other. Okay, so this is what we call the interference removal step. Yes.
It's my understanding just get the left eigenvector of each layer per task vector,
Yes.
and then just make them again orthogonal to each other when you merge them.
Yes.
So I think that's it's like crunching process, apply crunching process of the full vector because you want to make them independent to each.
Exactly. You get the right intuition. Exactly that. It's exactly that. So you have many different names for this procedure. It's called whitening in signal processing. It is, yes.
So eventually, then your previous slide, just your task low rank vector is quite focused on some concentrated on some tasks. So you just make them like equivalent, want to put some equivalent weight on each task so that you consider some, make them independent.
It's not equivalent weight in the sense that the weight is still given by the corresponding singular values. So there could be different weighting depending on the singular values, but yes, I make them equally important in a sense.
Direction is quite make them more diverse, more. Yeah, I can.
But you have a good intuition. Yes, that's correct. Okay. All right. So basically, the recipe seems to be let's do some whitening. Okay. So let's do orthogonalization. Let's do procrustless alignment. Let's do whatever name you know for this recipe. So you see that just by orthogonalizing, but keeping the full rank. Okay. So all the singular vectors, you see that it gives us like several points of advantage. Okay. So now let's do the following. Let's also do noise removal via low rank approximation. We get up to 15 percentage points of improvement. I mean, this calculation takes you the time that it takes me to tell you. Okay, it's super efficient. Okay.
So what was the third line here?
The third line
No
is
low rank.
the third line, right? No low rank. See, no low rank, only orthogonalization.
Okay, so you don't remove everything, but you keep all the ranks.
Yes.
So it's more expensive
It is.
and worse.
Yes. But still better than the baselines.
But it's weird, right? The third and fourth, like I would expect the third to be somehow better if the ranks were right.
But I mean, still there is some noise that is not really desirable, that causes some interference. I mean, this is what we observe from the empirical results. Yes.
So is there like kind of like scaling dependency on the number of tasks?
That's
My question was just about how like this improvement scales to the number of tasks, because it seems like the improvement is better like for 20 tasks than for 10 than 8.
So I also asked the same question to my students, and then we did some dedicated experiments for this. It seems like there is a dependency, but no. So from our experiments, this is just coincidental. It's not, yeah. So one last thing before I finish my talk. Okay, so this is just a fancier way to show that we are better than the rest. Okay, I want to close with an open question. So we did the following funny experiment. We said, okay. Oh no, don't tell me that they removed them. No, here. So we said, so there are many, I don't know if you're familiar with them. There are many ways to go into the latent space of models like CLIP. And then, for example, for an image, and then get a text description for that image. Okay, so there are many ways to do this in shared latent spaces. So we said, this is actually Alessandro Zirilli who came up with the idea, another student. He said, what if we take the task singular vectors, we interpret them as latent codes of text, or no, of images, sorry, and try to see if we can find a text description that fits the singular vector after orthogonalization. I don't know what recipe he used. There is one paper by Efrosh doing this. I don't remember the name, but it works for vision transformers. So we used vision transformers. And then we were able to interpret actually for the correct, we got the correct interpretation. So we're translating singular vectors of task matrices to text. And the translation seems to work well. And it seems to work well even across different models. So this is Vision Transformer B32. It seems to work very well. These are not cherry-picked, okay? So these are real results. You see several weird stuff like number 9, number 8. They're not exact, okay? And you see that this works well for deep layers. See, for shallow layers, the interpretation doesn't quite work.
So just to understand,
Mhm.
these are all, I guess, fine-tuned on a same model, and then you take the task, meaning you subtract the thing,
Yes,
and then you take each layer
yes,
and then find the singular value,
yes,
singular vector,
Yes.
and then try to figure out the text for that.
yes.
I see. Yeah, I guess that, I mean, it's hard to do, but I guess it makes sense, yeah.
Can I confess that it doesn't make sense to me because we're looking at the singular vectors of the deltas. So this is differential information, and we're interpreting the differential information. It would make sense if it was singular vectors of the weights themselves. So to me, it's confusing, but I wanted to share it with you guys.
I guess yeah, I don't know, but it's okay, I think. Because you're trying to think about what is new, right? In the just for the car. Like, say, if you ask a general question, it'll not tell you about that particular task. Yeah. What is, like, I think I would be very impressed if the orthogonal components really do orthogonal things,
Ooh.
which I'm not sure, right? So that I think what you could do is you could figure out if you did orthogonalization between things, and if you say that this conflicts with that between tasks, that would actually make sense, right? But yeah, I'm not sure. But this is an interesting experiment. Yeah. Cool.
That's interesting feedback. So so we published these results, but we didn't publish explanations or methodology. So we can actually work on this together if you like. Okay. So I will finish here. Thank you for the attention.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. Are there any questions? Also on Zoom, please feel free to ask questions on Zoom. Just post your question in the chat. I think there were already many questions during the talk, but I had one very quick one on the interference. You measure it with V transpose V. And is there any intuition? Why not U transpose U? And why is it interference?
Okay, so I want to be transparent. Okay, so I thought of using V. So this was my idea because I thought it would be a great idea. And then I found out that my idea was to do it with U, but not with you, with the left singular vector. But I did it. I was mistaken when I tried. Okay, and I did it with V, and it worked. And I said, okay, well, it makes sense because this is close to the output. And then I said, oh wait, no, this is not close to the output. This is close to the input. And so we said, why does it work when V, which is closer to the input, and it doesn't work with U, which is closer to the output? With U, it doesn't work. So we were not able to see any meaningful trend.
And these are two V's of different
Yes.
task vectors.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
basically checking how much they are non-orthogonal.
Correct,
and that's what you call interference.
correct.
And for you, there is no correlation, I guess, then, if you, yeah, okay,
We couldn't find any,
okay.
but
It's
that
very
was my
interesting.
intuition at the beginning. I wanted to do
Mhm.
it with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, it seems there's no questions on Zoom and no more questions from the audience.
I'll be
So,
here.
Yeah, let's thank Emma again for the great talk.
Thank you.